DOT in the current year. And we haven't dissected exactly what the reason for that is, but one of the suggestions has been that the impact from short-term rentals was greater than we had originally anticipated. So it's a combination of two factors.
So what happens right now if somebody has an STR? Okay, so we went to the Coastal Commission, it got rejected, so we are without any, explain to me right now, like if somebody has an STR, are we still collecting, or are we not collecting, or what are we doing?
Chair Williams, Supervisor Lavanino, we are collecting right now, yes. Okay,
well, we were going to collect anyway till October, right? Okay, are we going to collect after October?
That's a good question. If I am aware of someone conducting short-term rental activities, then I will be trying to attempt to collect, yes.
Okay. But that was still only somebody's part-time job, correct, in your department?
Yes, we weren't given any resources for that, so
okay.
Yeah, we just fit it in where we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Chair Williams.
Go ahead, Theo.
Chair Williams and Supervisor Lavanino, to add to Harry's comments regarding the strategic reserve, just as important as the actual balances in the strategic reserve and the contingencies, as I agree that they look holistically, is the policy that we have of funding that strategic reserve on an annual basis. And so, with this second year of a stopping of it, or basically a temporary halting, it's understandable given the disasters that we've had, but I definitely would recommend that you get back on track to do an annual allocation or appropriation into that strategic reserve, trying to maintain the policy of getting up to that 8%.
And can I ask a question on this STR thing that you bring up? So so we are still collecting, but in your mind, we are not doing enough enforcement, or is the feeling I get from your comments?
Chair Williams, I don't know if I'd say that, if we're not doing enough for enforcement. I think planning does the enforcement piece of it.
I mean, from finding people who are not paying their TOT.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we could be doing more, yes. There's one of the things we will be working with planning is there's a third-party vendor that we may utilize that would give us a lead on many short-term rentals, doing business in the county, depending on how it all falls out, though. But yeah, there are things we could be doing differently.
Mr. Lavanino.
Mr. Chair, I have something in my head like $67,000 or $70,000 is what we had talked about at some point. Maybe that was just a half-time FTE or something, or maybe for some software. I don't know where that number came from in my head. Right, a consulting service.
Because we may not agree on STR policy yet, but we all agree that people should be paying their taxes. So, yes. I mean, I know it's a dangerous thing to ask you, but you don't need funds to do this, or you have... I just don't want you to wait another year.
Yeah, no, Chair Williams, I'm not asking for any funds. If it looks like something we want to go forward with, we will do it.
Okay. Great. Wow, we like answers like that. Wow, whoa, whoa. Here you Other questions? Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had one for General Services, and that has to do with the Better Avius Solar, and I think we're going to go out on this and get funding through external financing. My question is this something that would benefit from the county putting some of its own general fund money towards it, or is it something that we can get outside funding for Better Avius Solar?
It depends, I guess. Chair Hartman, through you, or through the chair to Supervisor Hartman. We are looking at several different options of financing that. One is, I won't say there's any grant money, but there is low interest loans, either through on-bill financing, should we choose that, which is actually zero interest for the lighting portion of the project. Keep in mind the total project is about $4.5 million. The other is a possible CEC, California Environmental Council grant which we have to, not a grant because we have to pay it back. So it's a 1% interest loan. And then the rest would be through some sort of municipal debt financing. So general funds, at this point, we don't know the interest rate because it's going to be a blended rate. It's likely that the utility fund, which of course is ultimately funded in part by the general fund, will be able to make those debt payments. But obviously, the less we have to borrow, the better. But it will be paid back in part through general funds, through the utility fund.
I'll follow up to that just by asking, how small of an amount would we have to set aside in order to reduce that debt service? Meaning, is it one of these things where we'd have to put a lot down to conceivably reduce the debt service that you have on the non-lighting portion of the project? Or does a relatively small amount help us to knock down the debt service? My only experience to this is owning a home, so I don't know that it's transferable skill, so that's why I'm asking.
Bigger the down payment.
Yes, Chairman Williams, obviously, yes. If we were to somehow reduce the amount that we borrow, I don't have the figures off the top of my head. Obviously, if we got $1 million and we only have to borrow, overall $3.5 million instead of $4.5, that's a pretty big deal. So I guess you look at it from that perspective. You've got some debt payment money set aside, but again, that's for the COPs. This would be out of our utility bill fund. So I guess we'd have to do the math, I guess. And
that scale is, I think, a little bit out of our ability to pay at this time. But I mean, is it like a home where what's the non-lighting portion of the project?
The lighting portion is $800,000, so $4.5 million. So it'd be 3.7 roughly. Yeah.
So is it a situation where 10% of that as a down payment significantly reduces the debt service?
Again, I'd have to do the math to see what the payment amount would change is basically what you're looking for, and I understand that.
So if I may add to that, we're actually going to pull this project out of the original COP discussion and actually go to the Debt Advisory Committee beforehand, and because we don't think that the amount we need to actually complete that project meets the threshold of a COP. We think it will be less than that. But we want to pull it out so that we can move that project forward, because we did go out with an RFP and we want to make sure that our estimates remain the same. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's go to public comment. I'm sure there will be some questions after that.
Mr. Caldwell.
Chair Williams, members of the board, Andy Caldwell representing CoLab. If you could turn to page D338. This was, in some ways, one of the scariest goals or performance measures that we saw. And it has to do with submitted a regional energy network application and regulatory finding to the CPUC, partnerships with Ventura and SLO, that would allow the counties to receive ratepayer funding directly from the CPUC instead of via utilities. Now, as I've shared with you before, one of the things I've learned to appreciate that our previous leaders did is they created this thing called franchise models. And what they did is, so that we didn't have 10 power lines going down the street or 10 different telephone lines or trash trucks, they carved up communities into franchise areas. People bid on that franchise, they service that franchise, and here's the important thing. With regard to energy, they were able to finance Diablo, finance a dam, finance a solar farm, because they knew what their customer base was. It was locked in by way of the franchise agreement. Their ability to make a profit was built in through their agreement with the California Public Utilities Commission. So they were able to spend literally billions of dollars planning our energy infrastructure and our needs well decades into the future. Enter community choice aggregation. We are going to dictate to PG&E and Southern California Edison where to get the power. They no longer have a captured customer base. They will no longer be able to invest long term because they won't have a guarantee that you're going to be buying power from them. You're blowing up the franchise model. Cutting nose off in spite of face. And here's the real truth about that bullet measure. All the monies you spend are utility ratepayer dollars. There is no such thing as a free watt. They're taking the money either by virtue of mitigation, fees, taxes, or rebates. They're taking money from everybody's utility bill and recycling that to the stuff that you guys are spending as if it's free money, but you want more. And you want more control. Why isn't a 50% renewable portfolio balance? Why isn't that the definition of balance? 50% renewable, 50% hydro, nuclear, gas. Why isn't that balance? But instead, despite the fact that you're putting you want the PUC stuff and all the rest, there's a bullet point here on page 387. It says the county's goal is 100% of county electricity from solar, 100% by 2030. Now, maybe by 2030 we have the technology to store for nights, cloudy days, and things like that. Right now, you know what we're doing with our solar? We're paying Arizona to take it. We're creating excess solar in the middle of the day, because that's when it really does. It doesn't do it all day in the light. It's the middle of the day. We're producing more than we can use. We're having to pay Arizona to take our solar energy. But you guys want more. California wants more, and Arizona says, well, bring it. We'll let you pay us for more. Why is it a 50% balanced portfolio? And the last point, one of the reasons I bring some of this stuff up is I wish you'd give feedback to the State Assembly, State Senate, and Congress on what their mandates are doing and what the money is being used for that they send you via those mandated programs. In other words, you need to do a performance report back to the source of the funds. Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Well, I feel like that deserves a little bit of a response. So first of all, it's pretty important to indicate that in energy procurement, it's very common, especially in the jurisdiction of the California ISO, for over-procurement. The ISO, because they desire to have maximal redundancy and minimal downtime for any power system, they over-procure on a routine basis. So California, you could say this is fortunately, it keeps the lights on all the time, but you could also say it's unfortunate because we pay more than we should. Over-procures gas-fired electricity and also over-procures solar-generated energy. But it's more of a question of what level of reliability do you want, because if you want perfect reliability, then you always over-procure, and it's just as common in the fossil fuel sector as it is in the renewable sector. That being said, the good news is that in California we have lower bills than most places in the country because of energy efficiency. So Title 24 is a two-edged sword, I suppose you could say. To me, the discussion of a regional energy network or a CCA, to me, the end is not one of those things. They're just a means to an end. And there is a jurisdiction that just, for instance, was set on going forward with a CCA and then decided at the last minute not to because their utility, this is down in San Diego, and this was, I believe, the city of San Diego, their utility decided to negotiate with them about some terms. The city of San Diego wanted to have more renewable energy, and SDG&E said, okay, if you agree not to do the CCA, we'll give you more renewable energy. And so to me, these discussions are a means to an end and not an end. The end in itself would be more local jobs through more local generation of renewables. That's what I want, and whether it's through CCA or whether it's because SE or PG&E decide to let us net meter more or something else, then I'd be okay with any of those routes. Any other questions on global, statewide, or parochial issues? Then we'll move to our last functional group, which is County Council, Board of Supervisors, and the CEO's office. Folks have questions on that, or should we go to public comment to allow some warming up? Supervisor Wolf.
This is a question either for Mr. Gazzoni or our CEO, which has to do with the increased allocation to the litigation fund. And I had brought it up during the board workshop, and I can't exactly recall why we're increasing. Right now we have a balance of $2.6 million from last year, and the plan is to add another 2.5. And I'm wondering what the rationale is. That's almost $5 million in additional litigation. And then the recommended decrease is only 380. So there's a very large projected balance. So remind me of the rationale for this.
Chair and supervisors, we've talked with the board before, and during our April budget workshop session, we discussed some significant litigation, including Disability Rights California litigation, and this is designed to ensure that we have some funding to take care of what are potential costs during the next 18 to 24 months.
Okay, that's what I thought. It just seems like quite a bit of money, knowing that you're going to have a huge balance even with that being known. So, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gazzoni.
Let's go to public comment.
Mr. Caldwell.
If you could turn to page D57. Now, I know County Council, this is not a criticism of County Council, although it may sound like one. You know, you have on this page an issue of litigating property tax appeals, $3.8 billion. Now, we would agree everybody needs to pay their fair share of taxes. And we agree that County Council is charged to get as much of that assessed value out of Joe Holland's office as they can. So we understand that. But the context of this is shooting ourselves in the foot, because these companies have other places they can do business. And one of the issues is taxes and regulations, plus, like I said, the certainty of being able to do business here. And at one time, way back when I was a kid, Vandenberg Air Force Base was it for polar launches. It was it. That was one of the only places in the United States and even in the world you could do that polar launch. We had the technology, the facilities, and the know-how. Well, those days are gone. And so, you know, we see United Launch on here, we see SpaceX, and we see two oil companies, Exxon and ERG. God knows what's happening to Veneco in terms of the state being left with the bag for decommissioning that thing. But the bottom line here is California's got some of the highest tax rates in the nation. We are now competing with the world, and the question is when there is a tax dispute, do we go for the juggler, so to speak, wanting them to pay the absolute maximum, when in reality that may lead to a business decision that, you know what, California's too expensive. It's just too expensive to do that. Companies come to that conclusion every day. We had a presentation a couple years ago with the Chamber of Commerce, brought these guys in from Texas. Texas has gotten literally billions of dollars of investment, not just from California, but from China and other places, because their taxes are low, their regulations are reasonable, and there's certainty in their permitting process. And again, to what degree do you bring this up? You don't set tax rates, the state does, but to what degree do you give feedback to the state saying, hey, we're losing business here? On CEQA, we need CEQA reform. I don't blame planning and development for the lack of certainty. I blame CEQA, the Planning Commission, and the board. They're just enforcing the rules. The rules need to be changed. CEQA needs to be changed. Again, that's something I don't remember the last time the board talked about the need to reform CEQA and maybe support legislation in Sacramento to reform CEQA. Supervisor Williams, we're a little bit disturbed on D12. You have this first we heard about this, you have an item here. Develop an ordinance that would allow for cost recovery for use of law enforcement officers in false alarm activation and response. That, in a certain way, is insult to injury.